Hi, everyone. Dr. Liz here. Welcome to the Hypnotize Me podcast. I'm glad you're here, glad you're listening and learning, and hopefully it will help you with your journey along the way. I am a psychotherapist with a specialty in anxiety, insomnia, and deeper emotional healing. Hypnosis is one of the tools in my toolbox that I use to help people feel better and to help people be better. I do work all over the world. Please feel free to reach out and contact me if you would like some help. I've been an entrepreneur for most of my adult life, built an award-winning company, sold it, and then focused mainly on my private practice. That gives you a unique perspective, especially my ability to work with people in business at all kinds of levels. Before I go, if you'd like to support the podcast, you can go and subscribe to the newsletter. And you'll get free hypnosis downloads that you can listen to immediately. Another way is to buy one of the downloads that I have for sale. I only have a couple up there, but they're good ones. They've stood the test of time. Or if you'd like to join my Patreon, that's an additional way to support the podcast. I made the decision to not run ads during my podcast because I really do see it as an act of service. I completely respect people who do have ads on their podcast, but it's just not my path. But a great way to show your own support for it is to join the Patreon. So if you're interested, pop on over there and check it out. All right, everyone, enjoy the episode, and I hope to see you back here soon. Hey everyone, Dr. Liz here. This is a wonderful conversation with hypnotist Kryssa Bowman. She loves to tell a good story and she's very entertaining, and we talk about all kinds of topics here, including, can a spiritual contract be changed? Differences between EMDR and hypnosis, how to talk to physical conditions or parts of your body in the process of healing, and also talking to the right aspect of your consciousness or spiritual guides. So we cover a lot of ground in this one. I hope that everyone is happy and safe and that you enjoy the interview. Peace. Hi, Kryssa. Welcome to the Hypnotize Me podcast.
Thank you so much, Liz. It's great to be here. I really appreciate this fantastic opportunity to chat with you.
Yeah, I was really excited about today's interview.
And it's been a while. I haven't done a podcast in several months. So I was actually nervous. I was nervous before today because it's been so long.
Yeah, well, we'll jump in then. I'm sure the nervousness will just go away. It's going to float on by once we start talking. So,
well, and I've had a few opportunities, but I just was feeling like I needed to not be quite so in the public for a little while. Like I kind of went into hermit mode.
Yeah.
And so I'm only coming out for you though. I think I'm probably going to go back into hermit mode for a little bit longer.
I appreciate it then.
Sometime after probably July or August. Well, July I'll be at Hypnothought, so I have to come out of my cocoon for that. But we'll see what happens after that. But anyway, I came out for you.
It is a very public thing to do, like a podcast. Yeah. And I mean, any kind of social media, but I think the podcast has a certain intimacy to it sometimes that the other ones don't. So yeah, it is a leap of faith for sure. It is. There's definitely decisions.
Unscripted.
It is unscripted. Yeah.
I'm actually, I think, more comfortable on your side of the podcast.
Yes. Yeah. And you have a podcast. You said you have 6 episodes up at the time we're recording this, which is in May of 2024, and that there's going to be more coming. So it is a different experience to be host versus guest, for sure. Yeah. But tell people about your podcast before we jump into our questions.
Yeah. It's just called Quantum Journeys, the podcast. And it's a little bit woo, but also very grounded in science and empiricism. Empiricism is I consider myself an empiricist more than a spiritualist or anything else. So I have guests that sort of run the spectrum from change workers that work in clinical settings, but
Hmm.
have had really interesting sort of situations that are unexplainable by current modern science, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And then, um, all the way to the far end of that spectrum, people who have, either led or participated in an Akashic Records journey where they discovered their soul contracts and their life purpose and mission, and they've renegotiated these contracts, or things like that. And
Can
so,
you renegotiate a contract?
absolutely. Well,
Okay.
you're the one who created the contract. So,
True.
I mean, it's a higher dimension of your consciousness, but you created the contract for you in order to experience certain things and gain certain insights and expand your awareness in these
Uh-huh.
ways. And so you can absolutely cancel a contract. You can renegotiate the contract. And this is interesting. I have found out just through doing all these sessions, sometimes the contract has already been fulfilled, but we just didn't get the memo at a subconscious level.
Okay,
So we're
very
still going through the same
interesting.
motions as if this is the pattern we're supposed to be engaged in, but it doesn't
Uh-huh.
quite feel right. But we keep doing it out of familiarity. But it
Uh-huh.
turns out we've actually fulfilled it some time ago, maybe even another lifetime. And it just sort of got stuck in the consciousness.
Okay, fascinating. I'm fascinated right now because I have this I think it's a had actually, this
Mm,
contract with my oldest daughter who's in
mhm.
Asheville, North Carolina.
Yep.
And I talked to her about it recently because it was this I had this BQH session and we had this contract that I would move closer to her, which was never in my plans really
Mhm.
as a mom. It wasn't like I opposed to living close to my kids, but it's more just like, yep, you go out into the world, you do your thing, see what happens.
Right.
So I talked to her about it recently and I said, I'm not sure that's going to happen. I'm still having difficulty finding a city that
Mhm.
feels right, that's close to you. And I had another, I'm going to call her mentor. There's a mentor that I work with where we had talked about this spiritual contract. And she's like, I think you really need to tune in to whether that's accurate, what was created, what was the feeling, what was the information you needed, like everything you basically
Right.
just
Yeah.
said.
Well, and
But
also we can misinterpret things too sometimes because it's all being filtered through the lens of our current personality. So I wonder if, like, the concept of moving closer to your daughter, maybe it meant energetically moving closer to your daughter. Maybe it didn't mean geographically.
yes. Yes, it's very possible. And I mean, at the time during the session, I felt like it was literal.
Okay.
Afterwards, I wasn't so sure. Okay, let me put it that way. A year later, I'm not so sure.
That's interesting that you can cancel contracts, you can renegotiate, you can cancel, you can also fire spirit guides if they're not working with you in
Okay.
the way that you need. Uh, this did not occur to me until probably, I don't know,
Uh-huh.
less than a year ago. And it happened with me myself. I had this old belief that in order to go through life with a sense of, just being humble and having gratitude, that it's best not to be too materialistic. And so I had this pattern of blocking money and
Mm-hmm.
prosperity from coming into my life. So when I went into my sort of daily self hypnosis slash meditation thing, and I was like, all right, I would just like to figure out what's going on with this. I want to learn more. What can we do? Is there any wiggle room? And pretty much everybody at the table was like, we feel like you're pretty good. Like you've got a pretty solid foundation of like humility and gratitude. I don't think you need to keep having this particular thing holding you back. Because I was really worried about getting too big for my britches, apparently. I
Uh-huh.
have had lifetimes where I was, and it didn't work out well. So anyway, I didn't want my ego to take over, right? And I figured, well, one way to make sure that that doesn't happen is to just keep myself in survival mode, struggling all the time. Anyway, so I myself, my higher consciousness
Uh-huh.
or at least the aspect of my higher consciousness that I was able to communicate with in that particular moment, as well as these various guides and helpers and ancestors were all on board. And they're like, yeah, no, you got this. You don't need to keep doing this way. That's fine. Like, just open the floodgates. But I had one that was like holding out, like, no, that's why you hired me.
Uh-huh.
I am here to make sure that you do not do this. And I was like, well, that's just silly. Can I trade you out? Because everybody else is on board except for you. Like, why are you holding out on me?
Uh-huh.
And surprise, he was like, yeah,
Oh,
that's my whole purpose for being here, was just to anchor that in. And if you don't need that anymore, then yeah, I'm out of here. And I was like, okay, cool.
wow.
Like, consider the position vacated, and we will be on the search for, somebody to fulfill that in the new way. And
Very
so
cool.
yeah, and ever since then, it's been like hiccups, but like things have been flowing easier. It's not such
Mhm.
I no longer have that mindset of like, having to like scrounge and scrabble for every dollar. Like, now it's more just like all I had to do is sort of remove the obstacle and the money was already there. It was just like backed up at the door, like, we can't get
Yeah.
in, and I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, well, just come on in.
Hmm.
Um, I also
It's
had
a
this interesting
very,
conversation with it where, like, when it did come in, it was like, can you not just immediately put us to work though? Like, like every time we
oh,
come to the door and you finally open up and let a little bit of us in, you're like, okay, get to work. You need to pay this bill. You need to go make this thing happen. You're really behind on this one. And they're like, that doesn't feel good, Kryssa. Like,
oh,
consciousness of money wants to go where it's like enjoyed, not
oh,
just where
yeah.
it has to immediately. Like, you wouldn't open up
Mhm.
the door to a guest and say, like, here's your mop, here's your bucket,
Yeah.
get to
Right.
work, and
Yeah.
then kick them out as soon
Uh-huh.
as they do the work, right?
True.
That was pretty eye-opening.
Ah, wonderful.
Yeah.
It is a different feeling I found in my own life of when that feels unblocked. It's like it's
Yeah.
just there. The money is there. It's like, look where all this money came from. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know. I mean, I've been working, but it's just like it's there.
Well, I think when you're
So,
working for the money, it has a different feel than when you're working because you enjoy the work and then the
yes.
money is there. Just like you would assume that when you turn on the faucet, water will be there, right?
Yes.
It's just going
Hmm.
to be there
Hmm.
because it's always there, and all you got to do is actually just turn in order for it to flow. So
Yeah.
that's how I perceive it now. Like, the work is just me turning the faucet instead of like
Wonderful.
fumbling for every last little,
Yeah, right.
But I
Having to
was
go
raised with that.
down like to the river and scoop it up in a bucket and take it back home.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yep. And it has also given me an increased understanding and appreciation for just having indoor plumbing in general. Because that's the metaphor, but still it's true. Like, if every day I did have to go, like, walk,
Hmm.
grab water, bring it back, and then,
Yeah.
here, anyway, just like, yeah. Oh, and just being able to take like a hot bath at night. Oh my gosh. So it's so silly, but like, it made me so much more grateful. Like, the things that we take for granted.
Well, it's funny because I'm laughing because we are talking about that you moved from Montana last year
Yeah.
to North Carolina.
Yeah.
And I'm imagining that takes a long time for the water to get hot in Montana because it's so cold.
It actually does. And
Yours is
taking hot
like,
baths every night was how I like stayed sane because it was so
uh,
cold there. Yeah. That's
yeah.
actually after 30 years. That's the thing that finally like was like the last winter that I spent there. There was
Hmm.
one day when I opened up my front door and I could like the snow was like past, it was almost to my chest. I just
Whoa.
looked at that and I was like, no, we're not doing this for another year. Just like, no. I couldn't even shovel it. I had to call a service to come and just like get me out
Yeah.
so that I could like then shovel my car out.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're right. It was
Yeah. It's a
ridiculously
big,
cold and the water
it's a
takes a long
big,
time.
it does. And I'm in South Florida. I was doing some yard work yesterday and just sort of like refreshing the front, which felt really nice. And I repainted a little fairy door and a gnome. He needed his hat, his repainted and all this stuff. But it was so hot. And I got in the shower and put it on the like coldest setting. It was still not cold enough because the water's like actually warm here.
Right, right. When it
And
comes out.
yes. It's like, oh my gosh. Like I need like a freezer pack on the neck, to cool down.
Yeah.
But yeah, big difference. Big
Yeah,
difference.
swimming in the ocean right now is like the perfect for me, like in North Carolina,
Yeah.
because the water is chilly, but it gets hot just lying on the sand. But like
Yes.
come August, the water is just as hot. And so
Oh
it's not
yeah.
refreshing. It's like, oh, that's no fun.
Yeah. And in South Floridians, we don't go in the water in the summer. It's like taking a warm bath.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
really. So
Not
which
much
is,
fun.
can be nice in itself, but not when you're sitting on the hot sand. So
Right. And you want something refreshing for sure, for
you
sure.
do. You do. So we had originally talked about doing this interview so that you could share your experience with EMDR.
Right.
I get questions from people sometimes that call up and I offer a free consultation so that I make sure we're a good fit to work with somebody.
Mhm.
And,
I do the same. Yep.
mhm. And sometimes people will say, well, what's the difference between EMDR or hypnosis? And so I wanted to do a couple of episodes about that. And you had said you have a lot of experience with EMDR.
Yeah.
Okay.
Over a decade, but from the perspective of the patient,
Yes.
not the practitioner. Yeah. So I had quite a bit of childhood trauma and
Hmm.
even some adulthood trauma packed on top of that. So I was diagnosed with complex PTSD.
Okay.
And my therapist was one of the very first people to get fully certified and educated in EMDR. So this was
Hmm.
back in the very early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah, and there wasn't much known about it yet. Like there
Yeah.
had been a lot of research in clinical studies, and they had done. There was a lot of empirical research, like children from Bosnia who had gone through
Hmm.
wars, the conflicts there, and using EMDR to help them process. And so there was that, but it wasn't really catching across, the nation yet. So anyway, it was pretty new. Um, and so the difference, what I would say is, it's kind of like. Trying to think of a good metaphor. They both end up having similar effects in the long run, but it's completely different approaches, you know?
Hmm.
And so, if you're hungry, you can fill up your belly with this, you can fill up your belly with that. They're two
Yeah.
completely different things, but they're both gonna nourish you.
Yes.
So I look at, most clinical hypnosis, traditional
Hmm.
clinical hypnosis, is working at the level of the subconscious mind,
Hmm.
and it's going to be rewiring certain neural pathways that are associated with belief systems and perceptions
Yes.
and behaviors.
Hmm.
So EMDR does the same thing. It rewires neural pathways that are associated with those things, but also by depotentiating the
Hmm.
neural pathways that are associated with trauma in a way that doesn't make you have to dig into the trauma. That's what I liked about it.
Yeah.
I didn't have to talk about, I didn't have to like relive any of the traumatic experiences. In fact, there's some that I don't even really remember. My own mind has repressed them for my safety, right?
Um,
And sanity. Um, and so what EMDR did was just deal with, as the emotion comes up, much like hypnosis, as the emotion comes up, dealing with that and then depotentiating it from there, which is going to have an effect on the neural pathways involved.
okay. Can you explain the term depotentiate for our listeners?
Sort of like neutralize,
Neutralize.
so
Okay.
that it's not as strong. So it's taking a big trigger and just turning the volume way down. It
Hmm.
might get rid of it entirely. It might not, but at least it will be manageable. So, if it's constantly throbbing at like an 8, 9, 10, and you can get it down to
Yeah.
like a 1 or a 2, then you can be functional again. Which at that point, your brain is kind of teaching your mind that
Hmm.
it's possible to do that. And so it itself, the brain, might then continue to take on the work that it's already learning and depotentiate it all the way down, neutralize it all the way to zero. My
Okay.
own brain has done that. I used to have
Uh-huh.
agoraphobia. I mean, I
Oh,
know a
really?
lot about anxiety. That's why I was having EMDR, was there was CPTSD and agoraphobia. Yeah.
Ah, and agoraphobia, for those of you who don't know, is
Is
like you can't leave the house
it's an
really. I mean, you have
anxiety
trouble
disorder
leaving
where
the house. You have panic attacks when you leave the
yeah.
house.
And I could leave the house. So mine wasn't full blown.
Hmm.
It was still considered agoraphobia, but like I could leave the house. It was very difficult. It was a
Mm-hmm.
battle, a massive internal battle. I just had to push through the panic. But I also didn't have an option out because there wasn't a husband. I
Mm-hmm.
had infant babies. There was a husband for
Mm-hmm.
the first year, but after that, there wasn't. They
Mm-hmm.
needed diapers, laundry detergent,
Yeah.
food,
Yeah.
and I also had two school age kids. So like I couldn't not leave the house. But I
Mm-hmm.
had all these like little agreements in place. And that's what the EMDR helped me with was like, okay, I can leave the house if I have a second person. I can leave the house if I'm going to be back within 20 minutes. I can leave the house if it's
Yeah.
no more than 2 miles, like, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still technically agoraphobia. So yeah, fear of leaving the house.
Well, yeah, and as an anxiety specialist, we call those safety behaviors. So you're
Mhm.
making safety contracts with yourself. Like if I do
Right.
this, it'll be safe to leave the house or safer to leave the house. So then it becomes more
And
manageable.
actually, the safety thing, it was just safe that I didn't. What I was most worried about, and this is, I think, across the board with most people with agoraphobia, is having a panic attack and not being able to get home. Like
Yeah.
having a panic attack out in public, having a
Yes.
panic attack somewhere that I can't be safe,
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
so it wasn't like I was afraid that I was going to leave the house and some horrific thing was going to happen to me. The horror was the panic.
Yeah, it becomes primary. The fear of the
Yeah.
panic attack actually
The
becomes
fear of
primary.
being afraid.
Yes, the fear of being afraid. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And EMDR helped a lot. It didn't
Okay.
completely shift it out of me though, but it
Hmm.
helped a lot.
Okay.
We also did some Gestalt style parts therapy, IFS type things,
Hmm.
internal family systems for people who don't know what IFS is,
Hmm.
um, to work with the parts that were involved with the anxiety and with the agoraphobia.
Yeah,
But
makes
again, it
sense.
helped a lot, but it didn't completely shift it out. The thing that finally neutralized it was
Hmm.
hypnosis.
Was hypnosis. So how
So
did
I
you
don't think it has
find
to be an either
hypnosis
or,
then? Yeah, it's
like working
not
together.
it's interesting that you say that because I don't see it as an either or. I think people find the practitioner they need at the time.
Right.
And so sometimes I do recommend if someone calls me, and I start to get a feeling of like, no, why don't you call my friend who does EMDR, my colleague? Like I think that's the path that you really it feels like you should go down versus
Right.
hypnosis.
Yeah.
Sometimes they come to me after they've had EMDR and they feel like, okay, it did help them, but there's still something left. And
Yeah.
so now they're
And you're
ready for
spot on with that.
hypnosis.
I absolutely agree that like we find the practitioner that we need.
Hmm.
Um, and I love metaphors. So here's another metaphor, but it's like each practitioner like loosens up the tight lid on the pickle jar. And
Yeah.
then eventually we can pop the lid all the way off. But that doesn't mean that that
Hmm.
final practitioner like had any more magical juice than the other ones. It's just that each modality, each attempt, each practitioner, each whatever is working to release the layers so that we can
Yes.
finally release the issue, the problem, the whatever it is. Um,
Yes.
yeah. And I don't believe that there is a one size fits all.
Yeah, me
I
neither.
just don't,
Yeah.
I think with certain things maybe that are very analog, like very just on or off, like smoking, you
Hmm.
might be able to have more of that. But even then, it's really important to find the right practitioner because you have to
Yeah,
have that sense of trust and rapport. So even if you're like the greatest smoking cessation practitioner known on the face of the planet, if you have a client that doesn't feel comfortable with you, it's not going to be as effective. Whereas like
for
a brand
sure.
new up and coming hypnotist that doesn't really know that much or hasn't been doing it for a whole long time, but you have that rapport and that trust, they might actually get that movement.
It's
Yeah.
I do smoking cessation. I actually have about a 95% success rate
Oh, that's fantastic.
in like one session.
Yes.
And occasionally I'll have someone who needs more than one session and they
But it
sometimes they
sounds
need
like
to
you
just
also have
do
a very
some
good
deeper
vetting
work.
process to make sure that you guys have good rapport.
Well, what I was going to say is that often I don't see it as the practitioner, I see it as the readiness of the client.
Yeah.
So if someone's typically I can hear it if someone is really committed to
Right.
doing it, that they're ready, they're doing it for themselves. Sometimes if they say, well, this happens, they'll literally call me on the way home from the hospital and they'll,
Mhm.
and they'll say, I have to stop smoking. It's just in the hospital. And so I said, well, give me a call back with 10 other reasons for yourself.
Right.
Not that your doctor told you, because your doctor's probably told you for 30 years to stop smoking. Like it's not a reason to stop smoking, really. And, who knows if they're right or not? I don't know.
Yeah.
Give me your own reasons. Come up with
Right.
those. Give me a call back. There is an interaction there. I do see what you're saying. Like you could have a baby hypnotist, let's say a beginning hypnotist,
Right.
but they can still help you stop smoking if the fit
Yeah.
is right, if
Yep.
the
If the fit is
motivation
right.
is there,
I think
and the
that's
client.
absolutely
Yeah.
such an important part that gets
Yeah.
often overlooked when, well, how people in our particular industry have a tendency to hoard certifications, always thinking we need to have the next one, the new one, the better one.
Yes.
And it's
Totally.
great to have
So
a
you
full
can take a
toolbox.
million
Yeah.
certifications and do
I mean,
nothing,
you
actually.
can see my wall. So, I mean, I'm not immune, but, and we keep thinking that the next one's going to be the one that really does it. And
Yeah.
honestly, I think it's great that we have all these tools, right? Like it's
Yes. It's
fantastic and the
true.
skills to use them and everything. It comes down so much to the rapport and
Yes.
the sense of trust that the client has. And I
Yes.
don't necessarily think that that's 100% on the confidence of the hypnotist. I know that that's something
For
that a
sure.
lot of
No.
people would disagree with me about, but I don't think we need to go in there with false bravado of I can do anything all the time. I have a
No.
100% success rate, and then think that that's what gets the client to trust you. I think
Oh, no,
energetically
no, no.
they'll be like, oh, this person's full of BS.
Oh, no, I see it actually as quite the opposite. Like spiritually, whoever needs to find me
Yeah,
will find me. And that has nothing to do with my confidence or really how many certifications I have.
right.
It's,
Yeah. And when I
you know,
started substituting curiosity for
uh-huh.
confidence, it changed everything. I was
Oh,
like,
I
instead
love
of
that.
I feel 100% confident that I can help you, I was just like, well, let's go see what we can find out. This is a
Yeah,
collaborative effort. We're in this
it
together.
is.
Let's go
Yeah.
find out what's going on and see what we can do, to improve
Yes.
things. And then I've got their buy-in because they're like, yeah, I want to do that.
Yeah,
This is my life. I want to be a collaborator with you on these changes.
absolutely.
Um, and it changed because then I'm legitimately 100% invested in them as the main character in the session because they are the most fascinating person in the world to me while we're
Yes.
going through this because I'm so curious on what they're going to discover. Not what I'm going to discover,
Yeah.
but what they're going to discover. And it
Yes.
just changed the whole dynamic entirely. Instead of it being about my confidence or my ego or my
Mm-hmm.
certifications or
Mm-hmm.
me, now it's not about me at all. It's about
Mm-hmm.
them. And then me just having this beautiful toolbox of all of these different things that I can pull out and be like, I think this one will really help. Would you like to try it?
Yes. Yes.
And then they
So
accept it and
how
go, yes.
so how did you find your way to hypnosis? You said
Because of
from
agoraphobia.
EMDR to
Yeah.
hypnosis.
Yep. So it's with the EMDR after, I mean, most people have a very short run of EMDR. I was seeing
Yeah.
a therapist for 13 years and we were doing EMDR for 10 of those 13 years.
Not like every session, I'm assuming.
No, but a lot
Okay.
of them.
A lot of them.
I just
Those are
had
like weekly sessions?
sometimes weekly, sometimes we would do it every 2 weeks. There were
Okay.
breaks in between here and there too.
Yeah.
When my agoraphobia would get really bad, I couldn't even go see her. And then we did start
Mm.
off with her coming to me, which was
Mm-hmm.
fan-flipping-tastic because that's not something that most people, it was before the days of Zoom. So,
Yeah, yeah.
now I can
Right.
help anybody
Mm-hmm.
as we can just do it online. But back then
Yeah.
that wasn't the case. But yeah, so she referred me to a local hypnotherapist.
Oh, okay.
And in 3 sessions, it was depotentiated. It was gone. It was pretty much I
Wow.
couldn't even believe it. I was so um I would go, it wasn't even like a switch and on off. What happened was I would be doing my normal thing, my normal way, thinking okay, I need to go to Target today. It's
Mm-hmm.
less than 2 miles away. What time is it right now? As long as I'm back by this time, then I'll be okay. Or I would look
Mm-hmm.
for somebody to come with me. And then the time would just pass by and I wouldn't remember that I was supposed to get back home in order to feel safe. And
Mm.
I would just keep
Mm-hmm.
shopping and then I would notice and be like, oh, I'm 20 minutes past my time. I'm just going to keep
Mm.
going and see what happens. And I get all excited and I'd be like, I think I might go out to lunch. And then I'd be like, I'm still
I
doing
love
good.
it.
And then like I would just kind of notice like, oh, and I don't even have a second person. Like, what is all this about? Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, 3 hypnosis sessions
Mm.
helped me. And again, like we were just talking about, it's not like the EMDR didn't.
Yeah.
Helped me a lot. And I think I needed that to get to the point where I could accept all of the stuff that was happening in hypnosis, because we did dive deep and I actually did some regression, which I'm much more picky about now because of what happened with me. But I did have to go diving into some memories that I really wasn't comfortable with,
Mm-hmm.
and it was hard, but effective. I will say that. I have
Yeah.
since then, that was years ago, since then found much more effective ways of dealing with regression so you don't have to go into the traumatic memories. But
Wow. Well,
anyway,
tell us, because a lot of people are afraid of regression. I do regression,
yeah,
not always, it's not always appropriate, but
right.
yeah, a
Well,
lot
so
of people are
the
afraid of
the
it.
the method that I use, it's very client-centered. And so the induction that I use in quantum journeys hypnosis very intentionally takes their analytical mind, or their critical faculty is what it's technically called,
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't just set it aside. It like puts it all the way to sleep,
Mm.
just bam. And if at any point it starts to wake up and observe, I ask the client to check on it and go, is it still sleeping? And they'll
Mm-hmm.
be like, oh, it's watching. I'm like, okay, well, go soothe it. Go give it a blanket or a
Mm-hmm.
teddy bear or a purring kitty or whatever it needs in order to just let it know that I'm recording this so it doesn't have to stay like plugged in, checked
Mm-hmm.
in. It can watch this later. And then I put it on their shoulders, go put it back to sleep. And then when they do, I'm like, okay, now we can continue on. But what we do is we go to this place I call the hallway of answers.
Okay.
And instead of directing the client to where to go, I say, I would like your highest self to
Mm-hmm.
reveal which doorway we need to go through. And just let me
Mm.
know when you know. And then I just wait them out. And then
I
they'll be like,
love
oh,
it.
it's the third door on the left. I can see a light under it, or it just opened, or there's a
Mhm.
arrow pointing to it, or a hummingbird, or like it's always different for every client. I always just ask, how did it reveal itself? Well, now we've got 2 things. One, they know their highest self absolutely exists because it just pointed out a doorway.
Okay.
2, wherever we go, it's going to be safe because this is the client, not the practitioner that's leading.
Mm-hmm.
They've found the doorway. They're about to go through it. Their highest self is on board. And so I don't know what's going to be on the other side of it.
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10, it's going to be some form of regression. Well, I shouldn't say, maybe more like 7 out of 10. It's going to be some form of regression, but
Okay.
could be to this
Meaning,
life. It could be to another life,
yeah, an
you know?
earlier age.
Right.
Mhm.
And so one of the ways that we deal with this, if they stumble upon this scene that happens to be, an old trauma, I just have them stand back and watch it instead of being inserted into it. So
Oh,
completely
yeah. Yeah.
dissociated from it. And then
That is
other,
actually how I was trained, is
okay,
that
I
you don't
wasn't
you
initially.
weren't?
No,
Oh, yeah.
but
That's how I was trained. Like, you do not want someone re-experiencing the trauma. You want
yeah,
them seeing it from afar, like a movie, or they're
right.
a fly on the
Yeah.
wall or something, so that you're not re-traumatizing someone.
My first training did not put emphasis on that.
Oh,
I put a question in the online forum asking
uh-huh.
about that because I had started taking MMHA also, and Mike
Okay.
Mandela was saying like you can
Yeah.
always just put it on a movie screen,
Yep.
put yourself in the position of the audience and the projector, and that way you have
Yes.
complete control. And I was like, I love that, so I brought it
Yeah.
up in that online forum of the
Uh-huh.
other academy, and I got deleted. That question got
Whoa.
deleted, and then because I'm such a rabble rouser and I asked too many questions all the time, I eventually got booted completely. I got
My
deleted.
gosh,
So,
what? It's a
yeah,
really legitimate question.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's also how I started. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hypnotherapy Uncensored Building a Better Practice Facebook group around
Oh,
that
no,
time.
it's at Jason. That's not Jason Linitz, is it?
No, no, it's my own, but he's in it.
It's yours.
I
Oh,
have a
okay.
different guest
I'm like,
host.
I know I'm in that one, and I'm in Jason Linitz, and it's yours.
Right.
Okay.
There's a lot. Well, so that's the one where on the first Wednesday of every month, I have a different spotlight guest host.
Uh-huh.
So the next one, June 5th, is going to be Scott Sandlin. He's
Okay.
the founder, along with Stephanie Skiba, of Hypnothoughts Live.
Mm-hmm.
Last month it was Roy Hunter. We've
Mm-hmm.
had Jason Linett on there a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
We've had Jess Marion, Beryl Komar, Bob Burns, Richard Nongard. Oh my gosh, like just so many great people. So
Yeah. So for the listener, these are all big names in the hypnosis arena. Like
right.
typically non-clinical, meaning like
Yeah.
they're hypnotists versus like hypnotherapists, although Richard Nongard has a master's degree in
Yeah. Yep.
counseling. So
I've
there
had
is
some
some
great
overlap there.
conversations.
I
Yeah.
think Beryl,
Beryl Komar.
I think she does too, doesn't she?
Has
She's
she?
clinically trained. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure
But
either. Yeah.
anyway, they're big names. Most of them run some kind of training programs or
Some
certifications
of my
or
favorite conversations have been
yeah.
with like not big, huge names, or
Hmm.
with people who weren't big, huge, but then started to become really big, huge. Like I had Freya
I
Nordsten,
love Freya. Hmm.
not Nordsten, Jordan, and then also Kaz Riley, and then she
Hmm.
just skyrocketed into like
Yeah.
the big stage. So yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love it when I catch
Freya,
them like when
yeah.
they're a rising star, and then like
Yes.
and then they
Freya's been on the podcast
she's fantastic.
actually about sex and hypnosis, and it
Hmm.
is one of my top episodes of all time. Like when you look at your podcast stats, you can see which ones are being listened to and downloaded the most. And hers is
She
still
also
in the
has
top
such a
five.
fantastic voice. I could
Oh my
listen
gosh, she
all
does.
the
Yeah.
time.
And I did some work with her. Like we actually traded. I did
Oh,
some for
nice.
her, she did some for me. She's really fantastic. Yeah.
I love that about our
Mhm.
community. I've done
Yes.
lots of trade sessions, yeah, all over the place. Stephanie
Yeah.
Conkle, she and I trade sessions a
Oh
lot. She's
yeah.
also been a
Stephanie
guest.
Conkle. Hmm.
Um, but anyway, the reason why I brought that up is because of my experiences with that first training program where I
Yeah.
kept getting censored.
Hmm.
I wanted to learn more from different trainers and also from the students of those trainers, like, well, what's your experience with these
Yeah.
tools? You know? And
Yes.
so I couldn't find anything that was just like a clearinghouse of like a network for all of the different trainings out there. So I was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna create one
Hmm.
because
It's a
I
good
need that for
solution,
me.
right?
So so
I'll
I
create
did.
this. It doesn't exist. I'll create it.
Right. So I did. And so now it's got almost 1,000 members and it's been going since I think 2021. And yeah, it's all just about like all of the different modalities and there's no jealousy or competition. It's just like
Yeah.
we're all just sharing our valuable knowledge, education, information, insights, etc. with each other. And I love that. I love that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a wonderful vibe. There are some groups that don't always have that vibe.
Well, you got to think about it like a lot of people who are drawn to hypnosis and
Hmm.
hypnotherapy, I think are very driven. Let's just put that very driven, very achievement oriented. And you kind of have to be a little bit just to have the initial confidence to get going with it, you know?
Yes. It's like starting your own business,
Yeah,
basically.
right.
Hmm.
And trust that you would be able to help people, right?
Oh,
So,
yes.
but I
Yeah.
think that there's just a lot of egos that get involved.
They can. There can be for
Yeah. Not
sure.
always, not
Yes.
across the board, but there can be, yeah. And
Yeah.
I think with any industry you'll find that, but I think it's particularly like higher in our industry just because of the nature of what we
Mm.
do, especially when you're talking about like entertainment style hypnosis and stage hypnosis and street hypnosis and things where you really have to, like, you have to have a strong ego. That's not a
Oh,
bad
yeah.
thing there. Like you
That's
need
true.
that, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so
I'm
it
not
can become a little
really,
competitive at that,
yeah, I'm
because
not really
just all
involved in
these big
that.
egos.
I'm not really involved in that world at all, the like stage
Yeah.
hypnosis or anything. I mean, I love Rich Guzzi. I've met him in person and he's a super sweetheart. He does lots of training around stage hypnosis. I mean, I come to it from the clinical side.
Right.
So
Same.
first I was a therapist, then I got trained in hypnosis as another skill to use in my practice, just like, cognitive behavior therapy or a specialty in working with OCD. Like it was just something that I added. And then I loved it so much that it really became more of a specialty for me. So,
Right. Well, my academic background is actually in applied psychology, but the applied is not the like touchy-feely counseling kind. It's
Yeah,
the
it's not.
research heavy meta-analysis laboratory
Yeah.
kind, right? But that fascinates me. Like I didn't want to deal with people's messy emotions. That was not what I was interested in at all.
Well,
I
that's where
wanted
the
to figure out,
empirical side comes from. Yeah.
right, yeah. I wanted to understand like how the brain works and
Yes.
how the nervous system works and the interaction
Yeah.
between them. And when I first started learning more about hypnotherapy, I was coming at it from that perspective,
Mm.
which I would consider, pretty clinical.
Yeah.
Um, but I was raised in a very new age way that I had rebelled against for several years, by the way,
Uh-huh.
because I lived on I guess they'd call it a hippie commune now, but sort of
Mm-hmm.
new age, intentional community, right? I see.
Yes.
Anyway, I went through my rebellious teenage years, young adult years, and so I like turned my back on all that stuff, and I wanted only hardcore science. And
Mm-hmm.
even psychology was like teetering on the edge of pseudoscience, which is why I went into
Yes.
applied psychology,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so when I started studying hypnosis, uh, and after I think, I don't know, 3 or 4 different like academies that I went through and, just collecting different tools along the way, something changed in my sessions. And I started having
Mm-hmm.
conversations with aspects of my clients that weren't necessarily their subconscious, but were something that knew and understood everything about that client from their
Mm-hmm.
entire life and in the womb. And as I
Yeah.
later discovered from even before that. And so I guess I came full circle because now, again, I'm still approaching it as an empiricist, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing that when people communicate with aspects of their higher consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
that higher consciousness is so much more effective at creating change in that person than I am as a hypnotist.
Yeah.
So my job at that point is get them into a trance state
Mm-hmm.
and help facilitate,
Yeah.
but
The
don't lead.
guide. Right.
Let
Mm-hmm.
them find the part of themselves that knows how to heal them. And so I'm almost like somewhere between a facilitator and a translator because I'm like I'm or like a telephone operator. I'm like finding who we need to talk to as far as that person's consciousness and
Mm-hmm.
then plugging them in together so that they
Mm-hmm.
can have the conversations that they need to have. And I mostly stay back and just ask questions.
Yeah. Beautiful.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes a lot of the pressure off me too, because I don't have to have a gazillion different tools now.
Tips
Seriously.
off of memory of me, I have a mentor, and I have a couple of mentors, but this one was particularly for hypnosis, and he was my first one when I first got started doing hypnosis. I met him at a conference, a Florida Society of Clinical Hypnosis conference. He said I loved to mentor. I said great, but he asked me one time, he's like, "Why are you trying to help?" And I was like, "What?" Because I was like, "I can't help this client. I can't." He's like, "Why are you trying to help?" The question confused me so much at the moment. And
Yeah.
now, of course, I understand what he was trying to say. Like the client really has to help themselves. Like you are
Right.
the facilitator,
Yes.
absolutely. But you're not going to come in and fix a client. Like
Right.
that's not going to happen.
You're going to offer them a map,
Yes.
perhaps, that they can choose to follow
Yeah.
to, whatever.
Yes.
But yeah, like as far as well, what I call it is communicating with multidimensional consciousness because it's not
Mm.
always higher consciousness. It's not always, it's still kind of
Yeah.
woo-woo. But like one of the first things that happened was somebody had a conversation with a tumor. They had a
Mm-hmm.
cancerous tumor.
Mm-hmm.
And I was asking to speak to the part that had everything to do with this tumor, and we ended up
Okay.
speaking directly to the tumor.
Mm-hmm.
And what I discovered from that is talk to the T cells, not the tumor, because cancerous cells are very confused. They
Yeah.
have this intensely strong desire to survive at all
Mm-hmm.
costs, even though they know their survival will kill their host and ultimately themselves. They are aware of this,
Yeah.
but they just have it's like a one-track mind. They
Mm-hmm.
can't do it any other way. So what I discovered after having a conversation with a cancerous tumor was talk to the T cells because they know what's going on, and they have like more sentience. They
Mm-hmm.
understood what their job is. And so talking to the T cells that could then go into the cancerous cells and destroy them from the inside out that worked. I also had a conversation with somebody who had a heart condition, and she's
Mm-hmm.
otherwise perfectly healthy woman, but she had this heart condition, and so I was like, well, at that point, I'd already had a few sessions where we could talk to a different part of the person's body and get actual information and start
Mm-hmm.
rewiring things. So I was like, well, let's just go talk to your heart. So she was like, oh, okay. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's going to happen, but let's just keep an open mind. Maybe your heart has something to say. So got her into a state of trance, and her heart did. It it
Oh.
it basically said the scaffolding didn't work, that the
Oh.
scaffolding was weak. And it was
Mm.
the actual muscle itself that was like not being supported properly, and that was what was at the foundation of causing the problems that she was having. So she had this diagnosis, but the diagnosis is, over here. The cause of it was over here. So we finally figured out what the cause was, and it was
Uh-huh.
showing her what it needed. And so I was like, well, is that something that we can do right here, right now in this session? And it said yes.
Mm.
Um, so we needed to get our inner healer on board, and we needed
Mm-hmm.
to, it told us to direct green light energy into, and she could see it, I couldn't see it, but into
Mm-hmm.
where all of the scaffolding comes together. And it was like this lattice work. And she said that she could see as it was being repaired, it started to light up and get stronger everywhere. And I was
Mm.
like, huh.
Yeah.
And she got better. It took 3
Wow.
sessions. We had to continue to work with her. It wasn't just like a one and done, but
Yeah. Yeah.
this lifelong heart condition that she'd had got better. Um,
Oh, yeah.
so talking to directly to like the consciousness of the cells of your body.
Yes. Yeah. It's not just, you're trying to say, it's not just subconscious, not just
Right.
higher guides, not just, past lives, for lack of a better term. It's sometimes it's multidimensional, sometimes
Right.
cells, or sometimes a condition, or sometimes an organ.
And it
Yeah.
does seem like with the higher consciousness, there's multiple levels and layers. And I have found
Hmm.
it's not super helpful to go too high. If you go,
Meaning,
well, there's like an aspect of the higher consciousness that's not really all that concerned with our tiny little 3D human life. It
oh,
looks at
got
us
it.
like we're just like a
Okay.
pinky toe. We're just
Uh-huh.
like this little thing that's like, well, you're part of the organism, but you're not that important,
Mm.
you know? And so
So it's like
like,
their perspective is so high
right,
that
like you
it's
don't
not
want
going
to
to be
ask
helpful
career
for us of
advice
like,
for,
no, but really, I'm so tired over here. What can I do? And they're like, don't
right.
worry about it.
Yeah, it's like,
This
oh,
is
that
a tiny
lifetime's
little
gonna be
life you're
over in
living
a
down there.
right.
Like,
So yeah, if you go
funny.
too high up, it does kind of, it's just like, whatever, man, that life's gonna be over in a blink. Don't even worry about it,
It's not going to work out. Why are you suffering?
Right. So you're not gonna want to ask career advice from that aspect of your higher consciousness, because it's gonna be like, whatever, do whatever you want. I don't care, like just let me know when you're done so I can absorb all of the lessons into the greater, expansion of the whole organism. But then we're going to send you
Mhm.
back in again if you'd like, So,
I
but
did
then
ask
there's
career advice once during like a spiritual session. And because I was thinking, oh, it's really nice just to go into like storage or something. I did get the advice back of like, yeah, no, you're here to be a healer. I've heard it over and over and over again. It's like, oh, I guess I need to hear that again.
yeah,
Like I'm not going to run like a massive storage facility, or, like I'm not on the practical plane here in this life.
yeah.
So it's funny that you
Except that
say
that's
that.
what we're supposed to be doing. So like that's been hitting home more lately, because I did spend a few years just really, I started dabbling in like communicating with my own multidimensional consciousness, and I
Uh-huh.
was so much happier in meditation than actually like being a part of like the real 3D human experience. I could spend hours in meditation happily, and then I have to come back and be like, oh God, I gotta make dinner, really,
Exactly.
whatever.
Yeah. Right.
But so now I've come full circle, because I'm like, I'm supposed to be here now. That's what this part of my consciousness is
Yes.
doing. Like, stop checking out. They call it spiritual bypassing, right? Where you
Ah, okay.
you just lose all interest in like what's actually happening here and now, which defeats
Mm.
the whole purpose of being here and now. This is a spiritual experience. Like, we're
Is
having a spiritual experience just by being here. Anyway,
yes. Yeah.
um, but yeah, so talking to the right aspect of your consciousness is the
Mhm.
important part. So when you want to ask for career advice, you want to ask an aspect that's closer to caring about your career.
That makes sense.
And I was just going to say, you reminded me of something. I recently had a session with somebody who is in the healing arts, but her higher self said, you're actually not meant to be a healer.
Oh,
And she
really?
was like, really? And it said, yeah. I can't remember exactly how it put it, but the message received from this whole conversation was something about like her point in this incarnation, her purpose in this
Uh-huh.
incarnation is to continue to keep her frequency high so she could anchor in higher energetic frequency wherever she lives and with whoever she's
Okay.
around. Just
Uh-huh.
by being alive,
Uh-huh.
she's already bringing about healing. Just by
Ooh.
existing. She doesn't have to go into a career doing that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
It said she could, but
Uh-huh.
it basically said choose a career that brings you joy instead of one that feels
Oh, I
hard
had a
because
similar thing happen recently where she's really burned out actually, and she was a healer and like she really just went to, go, I don't know, live on a farm and raise chickens, which I'm
right,
all for. I love chickens. Okay. But it basically gave her the same information. It doesn't matter what you do.
right.
Just pick something that makes you happy. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
And some people that's exactly what's neat. Like that's their purpose. They think their purpose
Yeah.
is they're supposed to like, you know, get this education and have that career and buy this
Mm-hmm.
house and have those kids and have this marriage and but from a soul perspective,
Yeah.
in many cases, it's more just like, no, you need to find what brings you joy so that you can
Yes.
let that joy trickle off of you onto everybody else around you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that if being in the healing arts doesn't bring joy, if all it is
Mhm.
exhausting, then maybe consider that you're perhaps not in it for the right reasons. Because I think there's a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
people who feel drawn to the healing arts because it's very sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It's a high-minded pursuit,
Oh,
right?
okay. Mhm.
It's something like helping other people to heal makes
Mhm.
it improves your own self-worth. Okay.
Mhm.
But if it's exhausting you, and if you happen to be an unhealed empath so that you're absorbing everybody else's everything that walks in your door or
Yes.
your Zoom,
Yeah.
it's
Mhm.
gonna be exhausting. So either heal that
Yes.
shit. Can I say
Right.
shit? Yeah.
Yeah, you can say shit. Yeah.
Either heal that shit before you continue to take on everybody else's stuff because you're not doing them any favors. You're not doing you any
Mhm.
favors by taking their stuff on. Or maybe look into doing something that's adjacent to that career. Doesn't have
Oh,
to
yeah.
be,
Right.
direct.
Yeah.
Something where you're helping people in a, I don't know, some other supportive capacity. So you're supporting the healing arts, but maybe not directly involved. So that's just my 2 cents. I don't think everybody,
Yeah, there's a million things people can do, right?
yeah,
Like to support themselves, really.
right.
So, I
Here I
think
am
that's a
shooting myself in the foot because like I have Quantum Journeys Hypnosis Academy that does in fact have a dual certification program that can turn people into professional certified hypnotists and hypnotherapists. And here I am saying, hey,
yeah.
if it doesn't bring you joy, get out. But I still stand by that.
Yeah. Yes. So we are actually coming to the end of our time. So
Oh,
why
this
don't
is
you tell
fun.
people how to find you, how to find your academy if they're interested in that, if they do feel drawn to being a healer?
Exactly. And you know what? You can always just get your toes wet and see if it's free because that's the other thing. Sometimes a person doesn't know. They might just
Oh,
be kind of
yeah,
like curious and they
for
won't really
sure.
know if it's a good fit until they kind of take a bit of a plunge and
Oh,
see.
yeah. No, I was catching up with a friend the other day and we're from grad school and we were talking about a third friend that we had who has a doctorate in psychology, clinical psychology. She went all the way through. She graduated and she became a librarian, right? And she's like, I hate people. I don't want to listen to them talk.
You should have done
And
applied psychology.
I know,
You get to deal with like
and I guess she
laboratory stuff.
works in like this very small academic library because
Right.
a typical librarian actually has to talk to a lot of people.
That's true.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, she completely went away from, what really her training was to be a therapist.
Well, and even though my background is in applied psychology, what I did professionally, I was a chef.
Oh,
Yeah.
huh.
For like over
A
20 years.
chef.
I was a chef. I
Really?
was a personal chef. I was a chef in a restaurant, and then I was a personal chef. I did pastries for a while
Mm,
too. But anyway,
mm,
yeah. And I didn't anticipate that I was ever going to be doing this. This came to me later in life. But now, I mean, it's just so obvious to me every day that I'm right where I'm
This is
supposed to
it.
be. Like, this
Yeah.
is my purpose. And I've had past life memories of me doing this same work,
Oh,
like putting
interesting.
people in trance states. It just wasn't called hypnosis back then. But
Okay.
yeah,
And what
helping
about being
people.
a chef? Past lives of chef too?
I don't
Like,
know. I haven't had
okay.
any memories of
I'm
that, but
just
I did have
curious. Like,
had a
did you
memory
cook in
of
other lives too?
I was like a midwife herbalist person in one, so I was always
Oh,
making concoctions. Oh, and my mom says that as a little kid,
uh-huh.
like that's how I got interested in learning to cook was because I was constantly making weird concoctions in the kitchen. So the
Oh,
way
tell
that you
people how to
find
find you. We got
right.
distracted
Okay.
again.
It's KryssaMarieBowman.com. So KryssaMarie, B as in boy, OWMAN.com, KryssaMarieBowman.com. From that, you can find everything that I'm doing. But if you want to just
Okay.
go straight to the academy, it's just quantumjourneyshypnosis.com. Note that there's an S on journeys, though. It's not quantum journey hypnosis, it's
Got
quantum
it.
journeys hypnosis. I
Okay.
don't know why some people don't hear the S. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's the easiest way to find me. I'm also on Facebook under
Mm-hmm.
Kryssa Marie Bowman or Quantum Journeys Hypnosis. I
Mm-hmm.
am on Instagram, Quantum Journeys Hypnosis, and I'm on TikTok under Kryssa Liss,
Ooh,
Lys.
fun.
Yeah.
TikTok fun. Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us and
Thank you so much for
all
having
of
me.
your wisdom. Yeah.
It was nice to come out of my cocoon briefly just to have this chat, and I'll probably be going back in for a little bit longer.
You can go right back in if you like. All right.
Thanks so much. All
Thanks
right.
again.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I hope you truly enjoyed today's episode. Remember that you can get free hypnosis downloads over at my website, drlizhypnosis.com. DRLIZ hypnosis.com. I work all over the world doing hypnosis. So if you're interested in working with me, please schedule a free consultation over at my website and we'll see what your goals are and if I can be of service to you in helping you reach them. Finally, if you liked today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast or tell a friend. That way, more and more people learn about the power of hypnosis. All right, everyone, have a wonderful week. Peace. This podcast is not mental health treatment, nor should it replace mental health treatment. If you need therapy or hypnotherapy, please seek treatment from a trained professional.